listening to the Fifth Down Fantasy Football Podcast with Johnny Slokes
top 3 to 5 pick next year.
and K-Mill.
For the value you could have gotten at Ryan at,
I'll take him. He has a nice body.
he's definitely got some inconsistencies. Didn't rise to the occasion.
We now bring you to the Fifth Down.
What is up, Fifth Downers? You're listening to the Fifth Down Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Slokes, and with me, as always, is my partner in crime, K-Mill.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's been a while, but we're back at it.
Yeah, feels good to be back. Yes, welcome back, everyone. On the previous episode, we had TJ on our show to talk to us about some rookies. In this episode, we're gonna compare players' ADPs from last year to where they finished in terms of fantasy points, and kind of see what we can pull from that to go into next year. Are you excited about it?
Yeah, I am. I because it's always a good thing to look back on the season that just happened and review players that, you know, wow, these are guys that I'm looking at for next year, and then you can look at guys too that are, you know, periodic like underperformers, you know, like guys that, you know, are consistently getting drafted in the top 2 rounds and they're failing to live up to that, or, you know, maybe this might be their first year on that list, but it's always good to review those names and get those red flags right now before the season starts.
Yeah, I guess this is pretty much the first episode that we've had this year where we're looking into the expectations for the 2017 season. Before we get into all that, though, let's do a little bit of station identification. We're part of the BS Podcast Network. We're in the gold tier. Go to us at www.bspodcastnetwork.com. Find us there, or you can go on iTunes and leave us a rate and subscribe to us if you haven't already. We're also on Spreaker and Stitcher for you non-iPhone users. We also have an app on Google Play, totally free if you're on the go. Whew. All right, Keegan, if you were the Texans, do you go out and sign Kaepernick or even Cutler, or what's your other alternative to the action that you do here at quarterback?
That's a good question because I'm not seeing one. I mean, maybe, but I don't think the Broncos are going to get rid of one of their young arms, but I was saying maybe trade for Trevor Siemian, but, you know, the Broncos would try to leverage a trade out of him, you know, get what they can, you know, because they're in a position of need. But they really don't have a lot of options. They put all their eggs in that Tony Romo basket, and that didn't come to fruition. So now they're pretty much stuck picking up bottom of the barrel. I think that they don't really have a choice at this point. I think if I were them, Kaepernick still showed that he had something, but at the same time, you know, he's still like, you know, I view him going forward as more of a backup than a starter. But I think that I would feel more comfortable with maybe him. Maybe they get a stopgap like Jay Cutler. You know, who knows at this point.
Yeah, I almost feel like that they're better off just going with Tom Savage, just because they do have a complicated playbook, and if they just go out and sign somebody, they might have struggle to learn that in time for the season. So I think maybe that might be the best option, or maybe draft, or maybe go in the draft.
Yeah, you know what? I was reading something the other day, and I thought of this, and it makes so much sense. That whole this whole like domino effect that happened with Tony Romo going to CBS, it all started with Brock Osweiler getting traded by the Texans, because if that wouldn't have happened, I'm sure that the Dallas Cowboys would have just released Romo like they planned on doing. But when that happened, they were like, oh shit, we can get something for him. So then that set up this chain of events. So if the Texans never trade Brock Osweiler, I feel like, you know, he would definitely still be in the league at this point.
Or maybe if they didn't trade Brock Osweiler, because they also with Brock Osweiler was also a second-round pick. Maybe they could have used that second-round pick and gone out and tried to swap out for like maybe Garoppolo or something like that. You know, they took themselves out of that game when they traded away Brock as well. So it's a good point to bring up. Do you don't think that Tom Savage could be the starter going forward for this at least this season?
No, I definitely could. I could see it happening. I don't know that so much the Texans would be confident to do that, but I think that right now he's their number one internal option. If they want to stay within their organization, he's their only option. But other than they're going to have to sign another arm to maybe compete with him, you know, or hell, they might just draft a quarterback. But yeah, you're right. They paid a steep price in that Tony Romo, the Brock Osweiler trade. to get rid of him. So at this point,
they're probably playing it safe in the free agency now.
Yeah, exactly. So right now, I think that they're going to at least sign one veteran. Whether that's RG3, whether that's Colin Kaepernick, whether that's Jay Cutler. I mean, really, you have to laugh at this thing, but the Texans did it to themselves.
Yeah, pretty much. Do you think that Tony Romo made the right decision to retire?
I think he did, yeah, because, I mean, the Dallas Cowboys did him a little dirty, I think. They kind of just blackballed him. They pretty much told him, but, like, once that whole chain of events set off, I think that he pretty much had, no choice. It was either we're gonna keep you until July, or you can just say you're going to retire right now. And he pretty much, basically, he didn't say he was retiring, but he basically is. He's 37. He's going to go broadcast. CBS signed him to a bunch of money. Like, he's done. He's never coming back.
He did say that he would entertain the idea of coming back if the Cowboys needed him down the stretch.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that's his only thing. I think he's just going to,
He's like, I'll come back if you guys need me.
Yeah, but it's only to the Cowboys, too. It wouldn't be, like, even to a contender. Like, let's say that a team like Pittsburgh, lost Ben Roethlisberger for the season and they're still a playoff contender, It's not like he's saying,
I think they could be contender with Tony Romo.
I mean, I would like to think that, but the fact
I don't know how degraded his play has gone, because he really didn't look that good when he did play before he got hurt. But
yeah, well, I'm saying more of the verbiage that he used was like, if the Cowboys need me, not if any team needs me. It's like if the Cowboys need me.
You don't think if maybe say a team would throw like $12 to $15 million at him, do you don't think he would try to? Maybe if they're a contender, like the Texans. I don't know how much cap space they have, but
I think they would. I think he would. I think that would be really hard for if somebody's going to overpay for him. I think that he'd have a hard time turning that down.
Yeah, I don't know if that would be a good option, but let's look at it the bright side. CBS has a contract with the Super Bowl through 2019, so it looks like he'll make it to the Super Bowl after all.
Best of a bad situation, I guess.
Julio Jones progressing well with the off-season foot surgery. He's in the strengthening phase. That's good to hear. Sometimes that foot can be a tricky situation. I'm not sure which foot it was, if it's the same foot he was having issues with. Do you know if it was or not?
Not that I heard of. I mean, we've always heard about the heel injuries that he's progressively had throughout his career. But I think this is good. It's just going to make him stronger. I'm looking at Julio, and I'm looking at a guy that I think is just going to go ham on the league like he always does, next year. Yeah.
Sticking with the Atlanta Falcons, Desmond Trufant signs a massive 5-year extension worth $69 million, $42 which is guaranteed. 69.
I love it, man. I love it, man. In my personal opinion, and some people would tend to disagree with me, especially Seahawks fans, but I think that he's better than Richard Sherman. I actually don't think that it's even close, really. I think that's a great lockup for the Falcons, and I love this deal.
Speaking of Richard Sherman, do you hear about the trade talks for him? What's your take on that?
Well, I actually have kind of a little take on this. So I think that I've been hearing a lot of reports. I've heard Richard Sherman has initiated the talks. He basically was, telling the Seahawks, you better send me to a contender or I'm not going to, this and that. We all know he's a loudmouth.
Yeah.
So it sounds like he's kind of being the puppet master here. And the Seahawks are I think they're getting a little tired of his antics. The fact that he's not only just chewing out players, he's now chewing out coaches, and it's not a good look. He's not being classy. And the thing is, here's my opinion on it. I think that he's going to stay with the Seahawks because supposedly what they want a good young player right now, and they want a high draft pick. And I don't think anybody's going to be willing to give that up for Richard Sherman. I just don't think he's worth that now.
Well, let's play a little scenario for a second. Let's assume that the Browns, they trade out their 12th overall pick for Garoppolo, and the Patriots take their 12th pick and some other player and package that together for Richard Sherman.
I could see it happening, but at this point right now, it sounds like unless Malcolm Butler moves, Richard Sherman wouldn't be really a big need for them. So I don't know. I could definitely see it happening. I think
because they were thinking about moving Butler too. So.
Yeah, I know, and I've heard about that too. Most recently it was the Saints, but at the same time, I just don't think that it would be like. I just don't think that Richard Sherman's worth that. I think any team that trades for him for that price is just stupid. I don't agree with it.
He is getting paid pretty good. I guess we'll stick with. I don't know if you consider this Seattle news. Marshawn Lynch visited Oakland on Wednesday. Does it look like it's going to end up him playing for the Oakland Raiders this year?
Sounds like it's inevitable. Seattle has a crowded backfield, so it seems only logical that what they're going to end up doing is, trade his rights to Oakland for, like a mid-round pick, and then he's going to play for the Raiders next year. I don't know what that's going to translate into fantasy-wise. I think everybody's kind of speculating on that. I have no idea. We don't even know what he has left in the tank. I would like to say that, he's going to be a pretty good performer next year, but I don't know. But yeah, it seems inevitable he's going to play for the Raiders next year.
Yeah, I like that fit. I would like to see him play. He did also come out and say that if he unretires, the only team that he is willing to play for is Oakland too.
Well, and also, another thing that I just realized, he's only 30. Like, he's really, I know, and that's when a lot of running backs hit the wall or whatever, but he's still, he's younger than I thought he was. When I actually checked his age, he still might have a little, tread on those tires.
I don't know if this really is considered news. Big Ben is not retiring. No shocker.
Yeah, I know. I think after a rough season, one where the Steelers, they had their ups and downs all season. I think that it can weigh heavily on somebody. It's happened to a lot of players. It wouldn't be the first one, but it's not coming as a surprise to me. I didn't doubt that Ben was going to play this year. Yeah,
me either. What team do you think AP ends up on?
I mean, if you read the most recent reports, it sounds like the Patriots. But honestly, he's going to have to take a huge pay cut because no team's going to pay what he thinks he's worth. And honestly, he hasn't been impressive. In the few games he has been healthy, he hasn't been impressive. So anybody that signs him, it's going to have to be to a very, very, very low contract.
I almost think that he's going to have to wait until after the draft for a team that does need a running back.
I agree with you. I think, and I honestly, I think that he's going to be at the best fit into an offense where he's not the 1-2 down back. He's going to be a guy that just splits carries with somebody. I can't see a team that is going to sign him to be a bell cow.
Did you hear about Jay Cutler may be forced into retirement due to lack of interest around the league?
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, I can already narrow down some quarterback-needy teams that, is not going to sign him. Like the Broncos would never sign Jay Cutler after how he exited way back in the day. I just think that there's just not enough interest. There's too many arms out there that are younger than him, have more promise than him, I guess. And, with the draft upcoming, there's going to be new arms supplemented in the league anyways, so he's just kind of old news at this point.
Have you heard anything about the Patriots re-signing Garrett Blount?
No, I haven't. It's kind of surprising. He had 18 touchdowns last year.
They're talking about a reunion, so I think they might end up re-signing him.
Yeah, I think it's possible, but at the same time, the running back position, the market is so light right now. I think that he's going to also have to, take less money than he's probably expecting to get after the season he had. Yeah,
I think he'll take a hometown discount. I know. Jonathan Stewart re-signed with Carolina too, so I mean that's one less running back off the market.
Yeah.
And I know you're probably all on top of this. The Broncos, obviously, with Romo retiring, they're just going to stick with Simeon and Lynch going forward. Who do you think is going to be the starter next year, though?
Tough to say. It's gonna all depend on training camp. It's gonna depend. Let's see how far Lynch has progressed. Personally, as a Broncos fan, I'm in the camp of Simeon. He showed me some flashes last year. The Broncos revamped their offensive line. There's been talks they might have another running back in the draft. So I think that they're definitely confident. They're going to put the right tools around him to get the job done. And I think they're going to probably give him another shot this year and see what he's really got, because he showed some promise last year. He took a lot of hits. He fell down the stretch, but he was under pressure all season because the offensive line couldn't protect him. So I think that he's got a good shot to get this job back.
I think they should roll with Simeon. They should see what he has. I mean, it wasn't terrible numbers out of a rookie quarterback. Gronk, he said he's ready to go for off-season workouts after that back surgery. That's some good news, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the most dominant tight end in the game, when he's healthy, he's on it. So I think that getting a healthy Gronk back is just going to go a long way, especially after Martellus Bennett departed. And we can't depend on, Dwayne Allen's health. So I think Gronk needs to be at 100% health coming into next year.
Man, look at all the mouths they have over there in New England. I mean, they just acquired Brandon Cooks. They got Julian Edelman, Malcolm Mitchell. I think they still have Damian Amendola. They got Gronk. They got Dwayne Allen, Deion Lewis, James White. Like, they got so many mouths to feed over there in that offense.
Yeah, it's going to be, for fantasy purposes, it's going to be really hard deciphering that offense, like who's actually going to get it. Personally, I feel like I'm staying away from Brandon Cooks next year because I just don't even want to decipher that offense.
Tim the Leech Hightower goes to San Francisco. Are you worried about him stealing any touches away from Carlos Hyde?
Not really, no. I think this is more
of a depth move.
Yeah, more of like a depth move, but at the same, and they also re-signed Juwan Harris too. So I think they're just filling out the running back depth. But I do think that he's going to be in line for some more carries, and we know that Carlos Hyde has an injury history. So I mean, it could mean that he could be the guy if Carlos Hyde either struggles or gets injured.
Keep him on your radar.
Exactly.
You haven't heard any movement on any long-term deals for Kirk Cousins. It's interesting coming out of Kirk's mouth is he says that he will play for San Francisco in either 2017 or 2018. It sounds like he wants out of there really badly.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like, number one, the Redskins shot themselves in the foot with this whole contract situation. They could have had him locked up, last year or the year before that. They chose to sit down and wait, and every year he's been good. He's been a top 10 quarterback in the league, in my opinion, and he just hasn't been fucking paid yet. So it's like, what does the guy have to do to get a long-term contract? And if the Redskins aren't going to give him a long-term contract, then I think Kirk has every right to be, displeased with his current situation. I
mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's, some draft day trades that surprise people that maybe the trades are already done deal but haven't been released to the public and they're just going to be announced on the draft day. Like maybe the Patriots move a quarterback, maybe the Redskins move their quarterback to San Francisco, and then maybe that changes the whole draft order around. Who knows? Stuff like that has happened before during the draft day, so that'll be something interesting to see in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it really will be. I think that's when teams are going to have the most interest for certain things, and I really think that we're going to see some surprises on draft day because I can already see some rumblings, especially with the whole Jimmy Garoppolo thing, with Cleveland.
Let's try to power through these last few here. Do you envision Ty Montgomery as Green Bay's number one running back?
I would love to, but I just don't think that he has the durability for it. I would say that there's going to be kind of a 1-2 committee in Green Bay. I mean, I would love to see Ty Montgomery be the primary one, but I think almost certainly they're going to bring another guy in.
Their GM envisions him as a number one running back, so that's a really good sign. I do think they will end up bringing some guy in there, probably third, fourth round, but I don't think it's going to be anyone that's going to vulture too much work away from him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Didn't they end up re-signing Christine Michael too?
They did, yeah. So I think that they might just stick with the running backs they had at the end of last year, by Eddie Lacy. So I love it. I wish they would just give this guy more carries.
Ted Ginn could be in a high-volume role as a flanker in New Orleans Saints offense. Does this excite you at all about him? I know he's not a great athlete by any means, but he's in a nice opportunity. He's going to be playing in an outside role.
Hey, the number one rule of fantasy.
I could see him getting 60 receptions for 900 yards easily.
Hey, that's what I'm saying. And you and I know more than anybody that in fantasy, the best situation is an opportunity. And he's a guy that you can probably get at a good value. So I'm not turning my head for that. I'm not Ted Ginn's biggest fan by any means, but at the same time, when I see an opportunity, I'm going to pounce on it. And if people are underrating him or whatever, or sleeping on him, I'd be a guy that I could get him at a real discount on him.
I know that the Twitter audience is woke. It's what they say nowadays, woke.
Woke. They woke.
Yeah, especially like in the early NFL 10s. Ted Ginn's getting up there in his ADP. It's been like 8th, 9th round. So I think some people are starting to notice potential in him. Amir Abdullah could return for OTAs. Are you excited about him at all with this vamped up Detroit offensive line?
I am. I think that he's left a lot on the table. We haven't really seen the real Amir Abdullah, or he hasn't performed to, what the Lions drafted him for, So I think that there's a lot left in there. And I think that if he can put together one fully healthy season, I think that he's got a lot we haven't seen yet.
I'm putting in a Fear Amir for 2017. That's my campaign for him.
I like it. I'm liking it. I think we're on the same page here. I think that if he can be healthy next year, I think that he's going to be very dangerous.
Some more serious news. Cam Newton underwent shoulder surgery on his throwing shoulder. Is this going to concern you going into next year? I mean, this is a surgery that's going to take a few months to recover from.
Yeah, well, what really concerns me about this whole situation is, why did the Panthers wait? Why didn't they get more clarity on this situation at the very end when they knew their season was over with? They should have been thinking, wow, we should really get, Cam Newton some throwing shoulder surgery because, we're going to need him for next year. I mean, it's baffling to me that all these teams are waiting to do these surgeries on players when, they could have easily just had it done earlier.
Didn't he play through a shoulder injury like week 16 and week 17, the last 2 weeks of the season?
Yeah,
what?
Exactly. Why are they deciding now to do shoulder surgery? It should have been already decided.
Yes, I mean, it's going to be a little bit concerning for him, especially since it's a throwing shoulder. So it'll be something you want to keep an eye on going in throughout the summer. All right, let's go take a look at last year's final PPR standings. Let's see what we could pull away from it, and going into next year as well, compare their final standings to their ADP. And let's see what their ADP is a little bit early here in April. So I know it's a little bit early, but something I like to do.
All right.
The first thing that I want to point out about these final standings is that inside of the top 10 overall, there was 5 running backs. One of them being David Johnson, who is the overall number 1 player in the whole entire league in PPR leagues. Last year, he was the only player over 400 points. And then the other running backs, Ezekiel Elliott, Le'Veon Bell, LaShawn McCoy, and DeMarco Murray were all inside the top 10. There were only 2 wide receivers inside the top 10, that being Antonio Brown and Jordy Nelson. And there's 3 quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, and Drew Brees. So it looks like the running backs dominated inside the top 5, or inside the top 10. But there was only 7 other backs that were inside the top 50 overall compared to 16 wide receivers and 21 quarterbacks. And if you look at it from a further perspective, top overall players, there's only 24 running backs. So that top tier running backs is looking really good now. There were 13 running backs that scored over 200 points compared to 18 wide receivers and 21 quarterbacks. You want to know what another interesting thing is that the top 2 kickers scored as many points as Cameron Brate, who is tight end number 6. That's Justin Tucker and Matt Bryan both had 171 points.
Wow. Well, you know what? My whole take on this is I think it shifts every year. I think that, every year, either the wide receivers or the running backs have like a down year, and then the next year everybody's like all running backs or, all wide receivers, and then it turns into the exact opposite, or, every other year. Personally, I was not buying into the whole 0 running back hype. Like, I was like, man, there's a lot of value to be had here at the running back position this year. So it just goes to show you there's no perfect strategy for drafting. You just have to kind of draft with your gut.
Well, I think what it developed is kind of like some positional scarcity at the running back position. I mean, outside of those top 5 running backs, it was a pretty steep drop-off. I mean, the top 5, they were all above 290 points, and then Freeman was number 6 at 255, and Gordon was at 250. Those were the only running backs that went over 250 points. I mean, and then from there, it just steeply drops off by 30. then it starts dwindling down from there from the top 10. So my thing is that those gems at the top really build their value that way because they're so scarce that there's so many wide receivers that were putting up points last year because the teams kept throwing the ball. I think that last year was the most touchdowns ever scored, but yet there was just a lot of touchdowns from those top 5 running backs. And I guess you could also throw Blunt and Gordon in there as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I mean, I don't see a repeat season of 5 running backs finishing in the top 10 overall. You're not going to see that again.
Yeah,
so I definitely think the wide receivers are going to. You're going to see both revert back to normality, and the wide receivers could have a big season this year. This could be. I know last year was the most popular year for the zero RB strategy. But I think that this year is the perfect season to implement zero RB because there's going to be so much value at the wide receiver position, despite the fact that the running back's so uncertain with all these aging running backs and these new running backs coming in. So I think that wide receiver is going to be gold this year.
I think so, too. I totally agree with you. I honestly do it every year. I see what people are starting to implement as their strategies, and I'm like, I'm all about it. I'm like, yeah, okay, you can sleep on these guys. I'm going to take them, though.
I mean, if you actually look into the current ADP right now, you can see the effect of what last year had on the season going into it. Actually, I'm going to look at it right now, the overall ADP for all positions, and the top 3 are all running backs. This is for PPR leagues too. And inside the first round, there's 7 running backs and only 5 wide receivers. I think last year was the complete opposite. I think it was only 5 running backs and 7 receivers.
Yeah, it was. It absolutely was. I'm telling you, man, it's an every year pattern. I think.
Yeah. Let's jump into some quarterbacks that were kind of surprising in terms of their ADP and their finish. Obviously, Cam Newton was the number 1 overall quarterback taken off the board. He was back into the 3rd round. He ended up finishing quarterback 16. Obviously, a great disappointment. What's your takes on Cam Newton? Why do you think he struggled so much last year?
I think it was, the health of the running back position. I think it was health at the wide receiver position. I just think it was health overall. I think that Cam Newton played hurt a little bit. I also thought that he played a little arrogantly last year. He thought that he was just going to be able to do the exact same thing that he was doing, the year before that, just running and not taking care of his body. And then he realized that, you're going to take some shots. You can't just walk into the end zone. They're going to hit you. And so I think that it was. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just kind of rambling.
Okay. I was just going to say, though, 2 things that I noticed that were down for Cam Newton last year in particular was completion percentage. It was only at 52%, and his rushing yards. He didn't have a whole lot of rushing yards, and that's where he gets a lot of his value from. But if you look at his overall stats, he had 3,509 yards passing, 19 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. If you look at his career average, he averages 20.5 touchdowns, 13.5 interceptions, and about 3,600 yards. So he is about on average for his total throwing stats. It was what happened was he had so many touchdowns last year. People had all these expectations, and he just reverted back to the norm.
Well,
I just don't think he's a very accurate quarterback, so I think that's also a reason why he only had 52% completion percentage. He has all these 6'4" receivers for a reason.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were saying it all, off season. We were like, there were beat reporters saying, Cam Newton doesn't look very accurate in training camp, and he really isn't a very accurate quarterback. Call a spade a spade. But I think the biggest thing was, we were very advocating, man, last year or 2015 was such an outlier year for Cam Newton. It wasn't with his career norms at all. We were just like, you gotta exercise some caution on that one. And sure enough, it proved us to be true because, he reverted back to his career norms.
Yeah, I mean, he had everything was pretty much on average. Just people weren't expecting him to revert back to average or hoping that he would keep an uptake on what he's been doing. A quick peek at his early ADP. in April, he's in the middle of the 6th round. So I probably wouldn't consider him there. He's still going before guys I like more than him, like Big Ben, Russell Wilson, Derek Carr, even like Dak Prescott and Kirk Cousins I like more than him. I feel like Carolina, they may end up drafting a running back and revert into a run-heavy team because they have no playmakers on that field on the offensive side of the ball besides Cam Newton.
Yeah, really, truly they don't. I like Leonard Fournette going to them, but that's another story for a different time. But if they do end up drafting, say, a guy like Leonard Fournette, can't you see that end up being like a run-heavy team and maybe he doesn't throw the ball as much, you know? Yeah, I can definitely see that. I agree. I still wouldn't even take Cam Newton in the 6th round if I were you.
Yeah, I mean, it's an easy pass for me.
Yeah.
I think that's enough on Cam Newton. Let's talk about Russell Wilson. He's another guy that was highly drafted as a 3rd quarterback overall, middle of the 5th round, that he struggled. He finished as quarterback 12. So that was still in like the fringe quarterback 1 territory, but that's not what you drafted him to be, 9 spots below his draft position. I think his ankle really bothering him more than he would like to admit. And I think that had a big part to do with why he struggled last year. There was a point last year where Tom Brady had more rushing yards than Russell Wilson. But he started looking more healthy down the stretch, and I think he'll bounce back this year.
I think so, too, yeah. It was just a matter if he wasn't fully healthy. I totally agree with that because I was actually at the game where I thought he was done for the season, you know, that 49ers game where he went out of the game. I thought he was done for the season. So he did bounce back. He did finish the year. But, yeah, I mean, with him not being able to extend plays on his feet, you know, we saw a different Russell Wilson than we're used to seeing.
Yeah. His early ADP for April is 702, beginning of the 7th round. So maybe he's going at a bit of a discount right now. I kind of like him in that spot.
Yeah, definitely do. Yeah, I mean, people have kind of, you know, brought him back down to earth. So I think that he's in a position where I would consider drafting him.
Yeah, he's coming like pretty much almost 2 rounds down from last year, so that's pretty nice.
Yeah, definitely. And you got to love the upside, too.
All right. I want to keep sticking to quarterbacks that underperformed last year. This next guy, I know we were both big on going into last year, and he laid a fat turd on you, Carson Palmer. He was drafted as quarterback 8 at the end of the 7th round, and he underperformed that draft position by 12, finishing at quarterback 20. I thought maybe he'd retire, but he's coming back this year. He looked awful last year. He looked washed up. What's your take on Carson Palmer?
I feel like you know, the Cardinals don't have a better alternative, so they're definitely going to be drafting a quarterback this year. So obviously, you know, they know this is their last take with Carson Palmer. But I think they really didn't have a better option, so I think that he's going to come back. But I'm really thinking that he doesn't have a lot left in the tank, and it really showed last year, you know, because he had such a spectacular 2015. We were both just like, you know, we couldn't believe it. So I think that he will have a better year if the Cardinals can surround him with better weapons. You know, Jermaine Grisham's getting a little better involved in the offense. So I think that, and you know, we all know that David Johnson's there, and you know, he's a pass catching back. So I think Carson Palmer's had some wear and tear throughout his career. So maybe he's not one of those guys that can perform at that age. Well, let me just say this. I would consider drafting Carson Palmer way, way, way late. But if people are, you know, I'm going to stay away from him unless I can get him in, like, one of the last rounds.
Well, at his ADP this year in April is 1208. That's like towards the back end of the 12th round. Can you believe that Tyrod Taylor is being taken after Carson Palmer so far in 2017?
I can't believe that, actually.
That is a real thing that's happening right now. Like Tyrod Taylor, let me pull this up for a second. Yeah, I didn't believe it at first when I first read it. I thought I was looking at it wrong. Carson Palmer, 1208. Tyrod Taylor's being taken at 1209. That's their average. So I'm sure there's some drafts where Tyrod will go before him, like he should. But I can't believe how underrated Tyrod Taylor is in this year. Seems like it's like that every year too.
It really is, yeah. There's guys you just sleep on, you know, because they're too high on guys like Cam Newton, you know, Tom Brady, Russell Wilson every year, and, you know, quarterbacks will eventually hit a wall.
I mean, is there any other quarterbacks that really disappointed you?
Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think about it, and I can't really think of one. But there were definitely some quarterbacks disappointed me last year. I think
one of mine is Eli Manning.
Eli Manning. Yeah, that's a great one. A guy that's really coming to mind is Fitzpatrick because I didn't think that he was going to be the end all be all, but I definitely didn't see the regression happening as rapidly as it did happen.
Yeah, another guy that really disappointed me that I know we both proclaimed him to be a top 10 guy was Phillip Rivers.
Yeah,
and he did not fulfill that spot at all. He ended up at quarterback 17, 6 draft spots below his ADP. So he was kind of a disappointment. I thought he was going to show out more than he did last year. I think he ended up leading the league in interceptions. It was not a good year for him.
No, it wasn't. And, I think that we can attribute a little bit of that to the Keenan Allen injury, but at the same time, gotta call a spade a spade. And, we were dead wrong on him.
Right, let's talk about some quarterbacks that outperformed their ADP. Quarterbacks that did better than expected. Kirk Cousins, he was the 13th quarterback off the board, and he ended up as quarterback 4, outdoing his ADP by 9 spots. Could have gotten this guy in round 10. I know that he was like your golden boy, like you were all on him. It seemed like he was in that sweet spot of late quarterbacks that finished high.
Yeah, no, he was. Yeah, I've always from ever since he took over and the Redskins actually gave him the keys, I've loved what Kirk Cousins represents. Even without a long-term contract, think about it. Every year that he's been the starting quarterback of the Redskins, he's been in a contract year, so he's got something to prove. So that's what I'm saying. So this year, even more so, with him wanting out of San Francisco, with him wanting out of, Washington.
I know it's in your mind.
It's in my mind, yeah. Even with him wanting out of Washington, it's a contract year, so he knows he has to perform well for his value to still be high and get a huge contract. So, that's in the back of his mind, and I think that I love it. I love Kirk Cousins this year. I think that he's going to have a great year.
For now, let's just say for 2017, he's with the Redskins. He has Terrell Pryor, who is assumingly his wide receiver 1. He also has Doxson, who knows what's going on with his Achilles. There's also Jameson Crowder and Jordan Reed. So it's still a talented offense in Washington next year. With all these options, sometimes the best option is the quarterback.
Right, exactly. And I think that the Redskins would be smart to just offer him a long-term contract right now. But that's probably not going to happen. But if he is in Washington, I don't think there being a big drop-off. You got guys like, Deshaun Jackson, who I've always called a home run hitter. That's all he's there for. He's a speedster. He'll get a mismatch in the defense, score a touchdown. I feel
like they upgraded, though, from Deshaun Jackson.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's how I feel, too. And, Pierre Garçon, he's kind of a possession receiver anyways. They got a really promising guy like Jameson Crowder. They got Terrell Pryor, who we saw some flashes from last year. And then you got a guy like, Jordan Reed, who's, in my opinion, the second best tight end in the league. So I really
and you're forgetting about Doxson, too. They don't even really know what they got in Doxson. Exactly. He was drafted as a guy to be a possession receiver because they were anticipating letting Garçon go.
Yeah, exactly. I can't even believe that he didn't cross my mind. But, he was the guy that I was actually high on last year, but I'm even more high on this year because, he could fill, any kind of role in that offense. And so there's still plenty of talent around Kirk Cousins, whether he's a Redskin for now. I would be more concerned if he went to San Francisco before, that would concern me a little more.
Well, you figure after last year finishing as quarterback 4 that his ADP would skyrocket. But as of April, right now, it's in the 8th round, 7th pick. Still early. I know people haven't really begun to mock yet, but that's still an excellent spot for Kirk Cousins in the 8th round. Yeah,
you could potentially get, a top 5 quarterback in the 8th round. I would do that.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Another guy we touched on a little bit. It's underrated. He stirred up some controversy. Was Tyrod Taylor. He was drafted as the 14th quarterback off the board, middle of the 10th round, and he ended up as quarterback 7, very quietly finishing as quarterback 7. As long as he remains deadly with his legs, I think he'll be a QB1, barring any injuries. This guy was quarterback 7 last year, and that was without Sammy Watkins most of the time. He was throwing to bums. So, I mean, I'm not to knock Robert Woods or anything, but he's not a number one receiver. So, I mean, I'm kind of impressed with that he was able to finish quarterback 7 last year.
Yeah, I find that extremely surprising because I thought he had a pretty productive season last year, but I didn't even think it was that good. I had actually no idea that he finished that high. But that's, to me, I was, as you know, when we were doing our pre-draft shows last year, you know, I was the guy that was in his corner. I was like, you know, Tyrod Taylor, there's a lot of value to be had. I've been battling for him, and I slept on him in the past too. Like when he started breaking out about 2 seasons ago, you know, I was like, he's a scrub. You know, he'll eventually fall off, but he's stayed around, and I think that it was smart for him to go back to Buffalo. I think that there's a lot of value to be had with him too, especially with him kind of quietly. You know, it kind of shows that how good he's performed and how the public perception of him is that, oh, he's a scrub, you know. So I think that you could get him, and I think a lot of people that you're drafting with are going to overlook a guy like that, and you can get him at a real value.
I mean, yeah, if you want to go, if you want to go wait real late for a quarterback, he's not going until the 12th round. So. Yeah,
exactly. So you can easily wait on him and still get him.
Yeah, I'm interested to see, is Buffalo going to add another receiver in there?
They fucking better.
Because that's the only thing that worries me is his volume. That's about it. I'm also under the impression that Tyrod Taylor is only good when I'm not watching him, because it seems like every time I watch him, he plays like shit. That seems like anytime I don't watch him, though, he ends up doing just fine. So.
Yeah, I know. And then you see these highlight reel plays, and they're doing the mid-game, like, oh, we have an update, and then he does this crazy play, and you're like, why doesn't this happen when I watch him?
All right. There were a couple of deeper picks that really hit. Obviously, one of them being Matt Ryan, quarterback 20 is how he was drafted, and he ended up as quarterback 2 just behind Aaron Rodgers. And this is every year there's a perfect example of why to wait on quarterbacks, and he is the perfect example.
Yep. I am always an advocate for that. I don't care if the quarterback that you're thinking about drafting in the 3rd round was like the end-all, beat-all. He was like vintage 2007 Tom Brady. I don't care. Like, you should not draft a quarterback that early. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, there's so many good players that you can get at that position, and you can still wait and get a very productive quarterback. Like, even last year, you know, I had Matthew Stafford. He was my primary quarterback all season. I ended up losing in the playoffs, you know, with him. But I had one of the best regular seasons with Matt Stafford, you know, like my point being is that I had a great team around him, and you can do that. You don't need to necessarily have like a game-breaking quarterback.
I know you brought up Aaron Rodgers in there. Where do you think he's going right now in ADP?
I mean, I would assume, because I know some people are really stupid, I would assume that's probably
he's going he's going in the back of the 2nd round.
God, that's way too early.
Yeah, I mean, that's where he was at. I think in 2015.
I can tell you that Aaron Rodgers will not be on any of my teams then.
Well, you know the thing. It's like the quarterback 1 curse. Whoever finishes as the number 1 quarterback next year is not the number 1 quarterback. They have not repeated that since the year like 2000. I think it was like Dante Culpepper was the last person to repeat as quarterback 1. It's like back-to-back seasons. So, just a friendly reminder. I mean, if you're expecting, I mean, the only thing is, though, is I could see him getting the same stats.
Yeah, I mean, I can see. I mean, every year you can see Aaron Rodgers.
But I just don't want to pay that. I'll never pay that price tag, though.
Right, exactly. But think about it. Even if he did perform up to, you know, that standard, at the same time, you stand to gain so much more by just waiting on a quarterback and, you know, getting another great playmaker in the 2nd round, and then you just have more value on your team.
I mean, last year Aaron Rodgers was an early 4th round pick, and he was the number 1 quarterback, number 2 quarterback off the board. If you got him in the 4th round, I mean, I'm sure you felt he was well worth it, you know. Just depends on what the rest of your team looks like. See, where were we here? Are you concerned at all about Matt Ryan without Shanahan there?
Not particularly. I mean, he showed a lot last year, and this team I think is going to be fully healthy around him. Devontae Freeman, took a big step up. Him and Tevin Coleman, I love that dynamic. Not for fantasy purposes, but the Thunder and Lightning. So I think that he's going to be just fine next year without Shanahan.
I do think he will see a dip in production a little bit, but he'll still be a good quarterback for sure. Another quarterback that you probably could get off the waiver wire last year, Dak Prescott, finished as quarterback 6. And, it's kind of a surprise. Last year, Dallas drafted him by mistake. They were so efficient because they were able to run the ball that it made life easy for Prescott. I do see him growing more into a passing role. It would be nice to see him develop more chemistry with Des Bryant. How do you feel, K-Mill, about Dak Prescott as your quarterback 1 next year?
I honestly feel like he's going to – I hate to be the regression police here, but on this one, I'm not completely sold on it. And it's not just so much because he didn't show me enough last year. It was because, number one, what you just said about the chemistry with Des Bryant. He didn't show me enough with that chemistry. And number two, the Cowboys didn't do him any favors because they were so cap-strapped that they let half of their defense, which wasn't really effective anyways last year, but they let half of their defense go, in free agency. And they didn't do anything to shore up the departures, You
don't see him finishing as quarterback 6 again?
I think that he'll have a plenty productive year. I just don't think that he'll finish right at, where you're thinking that he's going to, because I think a lot of people are going to draft him, with the same respect of, oh man, he's going to be the end all be all. But I think that my expectation for him is he's going to be probably right on either a fringe or right around at the top 10.
I would pump the brakes on him a little bit. My concern about him is he only had 459 passing attempts last year. He did have a great touchdown to interception ratio, though, 23-4. And you like that as coach. He had 3,667 yards passing. A lot of his fantasy value came from 6 rushing touchdowns. Now, I know he's a great athlete, and he's certainly capable of repeating 6 rushing touchdowns. I'm looking for him to progress as a passer. I feel fine with him as my QB1 because of his ADP right now is in the back end of the 7th round, which is fine for him, but you can also wait and just get Jameis Winston in the 10th round, or even later for the aforementioned Tyrod Taylor if you're looking for a running quality to your quarterback position,
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, I definitely think he'll be a solid option, but I'm saying that there's other options that can do what he does in later rounds. Yeah,
exactly.
Is there any other quarterbacks that you want to mention, K-Mill?
No, I think we pretty much covered them all.
All right. No, I know we were talking on previous shows about how abnormally high the running backs scored this year. We also talked about how 5 running backs scored inside the top 10 overall in PPR last year. We already dipped into this a little bit earlier on the show, but how do you feel that the running back score is going to affect this year's ADP? Do you think it's going to be like a lot of running back heavy throughout the draft, or is it just going to be during certain tiers?
I think that those top running backs are going to be a really hot commodity in the first round, and I think that it's probably going to be the tier 1 guys. I think those are going to be probably the guys that are going to be really hot commodities. Everybody's going to be wanting to get them off the board quickly, and then you're going to have all these values at wide receiver that are going to fall to the later rounds. So I think that's my personal take on it, though.
If you go on to Fantasy Football Calculator, click on PPR, you'll see the running back effect take place already. I know we talked a little bit about this on the show already. 7 running backs in the first round. Can you guess them, Keegan?
I can give my best shot. Obviously, David Johnson, Ezekiel Elliott, LaShawn McCoy, Le'Veon Bell.
Okay, you got 4 of them.
God, I know I'm drawing a blank here. I'm not too sure.
Devontae Freeman is in the first round.
Yeah.
Melvin Gordon and Jordan Howard.
God,
there's only 5 wide receivers. There's only 5 wide receivers. I know. We're gonna talk about that. I promise. I already know.
Well, here's my thing. I would have never guessed Jordan Howard. I mean, I'm glad that he's getting the respect he deserves, but I wouldn't have guessed that one.
I know. I was gonna say we're gonna talk about that one. But, if you look a little bit deeper after 5 rounds, there's 28 receivers drafted through 5 rounds, and there's only 23 running backs. So I think the wide receiver is so deep that there are more wide receiver types more than ever, and that's because so many teams throw the ball so much. It makes guys like David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell even more valuable because they can also do that too, and they'll excel in this league.
Right, exactly.
Is David Johnson your number 1 overall pick this year?
Absolutely. He did everything to deserve that, and I think that there are honestly there's actually only one running back that I think is like very safe to draft in the first round. I think that's David Johnson. I think that every other running back is probably a little too much or biting off too much that you can shoot, but I think that David Johnson will still be well worth it this year.
You don't think Ezekiel Elliott's worth a first-round pick?
No, discipline, off-field issues. We're already seeing that, and that kind of scares me with him. And I also think that he may see some regression too next year. And that's just my personal opinion on it. I don't think that everyone is going to think that way, and I don't really have a lot of justification for it. But I think that those off-field issues are the biggest concern for me drafting Ezekiel Elliott. I would hate to have draft him in the first round and then have him get suspended in the middle of the year. Yeah,
I have no problem with David Johnson as my number 1 pick overall. That's fine. I do expect a lot of people to put the top 3 running backs as 1, 2, 3. I don't quite look at it like that. I do think though I'd probably put it'd probably go David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, and Antonio Brown. I think I'd put Antonio Brown over Ezekiel Elliott, maybe even Julio Jones.
I would too. I am in agreement with you wholeheartedly. I think that people are like they were last year. I think that they're way too high on Ezekiel Elliott. I know he had a great season last year, but I think that it's just there's players.
I think he's going to have a great season. He's going to have a great season.
Oh, yeah,
just if we're doing a PPR rankings, he didn't really catch a whole lot of passes last year. Hopefully he could build onto that. I know a lot of rookies don't catch a lot of passes. It'd be nice to see that out of him in the second year.
Yeah, we're saying the exact same thing here. I totally agree with that. I think he's going to have a fantastic year, but I think that there's going to be players that are going to be better than him, though, for sure.
I will say that I know this is a little bit off topic, but I will say if your draft is going more towards running back and you're outside the top 5 or 6, a good option could be scooping up wide receivers that people have passed up on, and you could still find a lot of late value at running back. And we'll talk about them in a moment, but last year's most popular strategy, like I said, the zero RB, might be a very good strategy to have this year with running backs being value being inflated. So, I mean, that's just my little side take about the running back position as a whole. How successful do you think Adrian Peterson could be if he was to go to the Patriots?
I don't think very, because and it's not because I think so lowly of Adrian Peterson. I do think lowly of him, but at the same time, I think that it's more of there's just too many mouths to feed. I think if they get one more mouth to feed, it's just like, he's just going to be another name in, an offense full of names. So it's like, to me, there isn't a lot of value to be had there.
Yeah, I don't know if I see that happening, especially if they do sign LeGarrette Blount. Would you be surprised to say that Adrian Peterson right now is being drafted as a third-round draft pick?
That would surprise me very, very. That would actually really surprise me if that really happened.
Yeah, that's his early ADP in April right now is 307.
Jesus Christ, man! Oh my God, no! I wouldn't even consider drafting him in the top fucking 10 round.
I mean, I think he could be successful if he goes to the Patriots, very like Corey Dillon-like, but I don't see that happening if they re-sign Garrett Blount.
Well, there's already too many right now. There's James White. There's fucking Rex. What's his goddamn name? There's
Rex Burkhead.
Yeah,
Deion Lewis.
Deion Lewis. Yeah, the names go on, and then LeGarrette Blount too. If they re-sign LeGarrette Blount, like there's no way. I mean, who's to dictate who's going to get the playing time?
Yeah, I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah, me neither.
I know you're not a fan of Eddie Lacy going to Seattle or Eddie Lacy in general. But is he worth a fifth-round pick?
No.
Where would you feel comfortable taking Eddie Lacy?
Ooh, I mean, at least 3 rounds later, probably. Maybe like the 7th round, maybe. No, even then, I think that there's still going to be some good names on the board. I really would just kind of play pass over with him. let somebody else take him. He's got a bad injury history, and the fact is, think about it. Seattle has kind of a crowded backfield. They have fucking Prosite. They have Rawls.
Thomas Rawls.
They have Collins. The list goes on. I don't feel comfortable with that. And I also don't think that he's going to be in shape. Coming into this year. So I would just say
I'll ask you this: is Eddie Lacy really better or worse than Jeremy Hill or Doug Martin?
To be honest with you, I would rather have Jeremy Hill. I mean, I would also. I think that he is worse because of that reason. He hasn't been fully healthy except for his rookie season.
I'm just saying that those are the two other running backs that he's going around in the 5th round is Jeremy Hill and Doug Martin. I would rather have Doug both of those. I guess both those guys kind of have question marks. It's kind of like the question mark round or range for running backs in the draft. I think he's better than Thomas Rawls, if that makes it any better.
I think he is too, but that's not saying a whole lot. I think that Seattle's gonna kind of ride the hot hand. That's what Pete Carroll. He's always about riding the hot hand. And like last year, he was fine with letting he rode the hot hand with Christine. Yeah, he rode Christine Michael the beginning part of the season. He was fine with letting Rawls sit there. He played pro-size when he was hot until he got injured. And then, Rawls got a little hot at the end of the season. So I think Pete Carroll's is going to play whoever's hot.
I don't think he really likes Rawls a whole lot.
I don't think he likes any of them. I think that he just plays the guy that he thinks is going to give him the best chance of winning.
Yeah, but I made a bet with the Pirate Life podcast on Twitter. They're saying, does anybody actually think that Eddie Lacy is better than Tom Rawls? And I said yeah, and we made a bet, and whoever's wrong is going to come on the show to get roasted. So if we're wrong, which I'm sorry, I put your name with this, so we're both in it together. If we're wrong, we're going to have to go on their podcast and get roasted. But if Eddie Lacy does better than Thomas Rawls, then we're gonna have to come up with some jokes.
All right, that's fair. I'm at this.
This is also barring injury though too.
That's true. Yeah, that is that because if injuries happen, we all know that, and I think that that's very likely that Eddie Lacy's probably gonna. That's my most likely scenario for this year is Eddie Lacy's gonna be injured. He's not gonna underperform. He's just gonna get injured. Yeah,
you think so? It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, look at his history. Of course I think that, yeah.
All right, can we have a moment of silence?
Yes.
All right, that moment of silence is for our fallen comrade, Latavius Murray. You are no longer Latavius Murray anymore. He went on to the Minnesota Vikings. How great is that? That is so awesome that he went to a team with one of the worst offensive lines in the league. We could finally see how shit he is. Latavius Murray has turned into Matt Asiata.
Yep, pretty much. That's it, yeah. So he's RIP. Your fantasy value has died here.
If you look at his early ADP here in April, he is being taken in the middle of the 4th round. Jarrett McKinnon is being taken in the 13th round. Give me McKinnon all day.
Oh, yeah, easily.
He is not going to do very well against. That's the perfect. I was hoping he'd go somewhere with a really shitty offensive line. He could not have gone to a better situation in my head. It might be a bad situation in his head, but a good situation in his bank account.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. I couldn't have said it any better.
Yeah, that's fucking awesome. The Minnesota's line is not Oakland's line. You'll see more McKinnon than you'd like to see. How do you feel? I know I surprised you already about this. How do you feel about Jordan Howard being a first-round pick?
I'm glad he's getting recognition that he deserves because he had a stellar year last year, but playing with Chicago, man, that makes me kind of, that throws me up a red flag, from the get-go. But I could see it potentially. I just, for me, it's a red flag playing against a shitty offense, and I feel like he had such a great season last year. Anytime a player hasn't had 2 consecutive good seasons, it's a red flag for me. So I could see it, but I can also see the case against it.
Yeah, he was the waiver wire pickup last year. Finished as RB10. He finished as RB10. You know me, I was all about Jordan Howard last year, but there are some concerns for me about him. He had a lot of drops last year, so maybe he's only a two-down thumper. He's a big dude with some lower body injuries in his history. He may start to see a lot of lower shots because he's big and he's powerful. They're going to want to aim low on him. So injury is kind of a concern for me. He could probably get a high volume of carries, but he had 6 touchdowns last year, and I believe 3 of them came in one game. But I'm more concerned about him possibly getting injured because he has an injury history and he's so big, people taking him out. That's why I love taking Jeremy Langford late this year in drafts around like the 14th, 15th round to scoop up Jeremy Langford.
That's a really good point that I hadn't even actually given a whole lot of thought coming into this offseason. But that's a great point. Yeah, I'm all about that. That's been one of my primary strategies. Always scoop up a handcuff of an injury-prone guy, like, in the later rounds, because you never know. That could end up being your lottery ticket.
I mean, not that Jeremy Langford's really that good of a running back, but we've seen what he's done in a starting role
before.
Not. And if he gets plugged in because Howard goes down, I could still see him being like an RB2. So
it's like fantasy. It's like fantasy. It's like fantasy everything, opportunity is everything.
It's like your trap card.
You could have a mediocre guy, but if he gets all the carries, he's going to do something with those carries in most cases.
Yeah. So Danny Woodhead, he tore his ACL last year. Now he's with Baltimore. Do you like that spot for him? How does this affect Baltimore's backfield?
You know what? I'm liking it. It's more so like I don't really like the situation he landed in, but I just like Danny Woodhead. I think he's a great player. I think that it's going to be good because a guy like Joe Flacco, he kind of fills that role that Juszczyk, that he was playing before he left. So he can just be that dump off guy. He could be that that very last option. We can't make anything out of this play. Boom, give it to Woodhead. So I do like it, and he's a guy that I don't know. I just have a lot of respect for the guy. I think that he could really do well in that offense.
I do like the pickup by Baltimore. Danny Woodhead, he's a guy that can fit into any offense, and you know what his role is going to be when he goes to that offense. He's going to be the third down back. That's what he does. So what that's telling me is that they foreseen kind of Dixon being suspended for 4 games. So like, well, why not sign Danny Woodhead? And maybe Danny Woodhead ends up keeping down that passing down role, and that could really hurt kind of Dixon's fantasy production. But I think that they're going to be committed to Terrence West at running back.
Really? That's surprising to me that you'd say that. But, the writing's on the wall at this point because Kenneth Dixon, with the suspension, he's kind of taken his hat out of the ring. But I tend to agree with you, I think that as mediocre as I think Terrence West is, I think that he's going to be the guy next year, unless they draft somebody, of course. But even then,
it's just remember like all the passes that Ray Rice, look at all the passes that he caught before he left. Like that's a team that throws the running back a lot, so I really like that pickup. What I realized when I was looking at the overall scoring from all the positions, what I realized about running back?
What's that?
Is what I realized is it wouldn't be a bad idea last year if you really did want to wait for running back, because running backs 37 through 47 all outdid their ADP by more than 10 spots. And these are running backs like LeGarrette Blount, James White, Christine Michael. Remember him being good when he started. Theo Riddick, Bilal Powell, Isaiah Crowell, Ajayi, Spencer Ware. All these guys were in that range that ended up being very useful fantasy starters last year. So, that's one thing I did notice about the running back position is a lot of the good production that came from the running back position came from those spots later in the draft.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, and you know what? I noticed this year too, the running back position, the guys that, people were advocating for the zero running back strategy, when they were like, oh, all these running backs can get later, like Ryan Matthews and stuff like that, they all underperformed. They didn't perform to standards. So
I'm saying there was a lot of late running backs that did perform though. Is my thing.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I was just naming off all these guys that went RB 37 or later that were like fantasy starters.
Yeah, there were some guys that you could advocate for. I'm just saying that there were a lot of guys that were misses too.
Well, this year, the running backs that are in that same range, RB 37 to RB 47, are guys like Danny Woodhead, Gio Bernard, Rob Kelly, Ryan Matthews, Devontae Booker, Charlie Sims, Chris Ivory, Mike Gilsey, Darren Sproles. Is there any of these that spark your interest?
I think Rob Kelly. I mean, honestly, he's probably the one that's on my mind. I think that he's kind of I wouldn't say he's cemented himself, but I think he's definitely going to be the guy that gets the first crack in Washington.
I want to hear some conviction out of you, K-Mill. Do you see Rob Kelly getting starter-like touches this year?
Yes.
I just maybe he does. I just don't see it. I could see Matt Jones getting in there. I don't think Rob Kelly is that special. He doesn't catch the ball. He's just a thumper that falls forward. I do think he will get a decent amount of carries. He can get over 200 carries. I just don't think that they view him as a long-term starter on their team. They may go out and draft a guy.
I think I definitely see where you're coming from with that, because I think that they will draft a guy too. But I think that next year, I think that they've soured on Jones, and I think that they're going to give Rob Kelly the first crack, and I think they're going to give him at least 1-2 down carries. And he showed me a lot of good stuff that I like. Yeah, he's a 1-2 down thumper. Like he just he's more of like a run right through the defense guy instead of being fluky and jukey and stuff. But at the same time, I like his running style. He put his head down, ran through people. I like it.
He looked like a guy that was fighting for his job last year, and that's what made him so special, because he was always falling forward. You knew you were getting positive yards when you gave him the ball. But it'll be interesting to see if he's still going to run that way, knowing that maybe if they just give him the starting job, maybe he's like, well, I got the starting job now. Or maybe they keep him hungry and they do draft a guy.
Maybe they do, yeah. Maybe they're like, hey, your job's in jeopardy again, and hope they can spark the same kind of thing that they got last year. But I think he definitely proved something last year. And I think that he was like, he told Washington, he's like, prove it, or they told him prove it, and he did it. So I feel like that he would be the guy.
He was definitely a guy that stood out during the preseason last year, and then they finally gave him a chance, and he did good with it. So he's going pretty low, though. I thought he'd go a lot sooner than that, actually. All right. Is there any other intriguing options at running backs that we haven't discussed that you want to talk about?
No, I think I'm good with the running back position.
All right, let's go over to the wide receivers. Would you put any of – I kind of touched on this for me. Would you put any of the top 3 receivers over any of the top 3 running backs in this year's draft? Basically, it's asking, are you in favor of Julio Jones, say, over Ezekiel Elliott?
I was actually literally just going to say that. I was going to say yes. If you're speaking to a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, I think that David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell, I wouldn't so much cross, but I would say that a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, I would put a guy like Julio Jones and Antonio Brown over him.
Antonio Brown was the only wide receiver last year to top over 300 points. I think that Big Ben had a down year, and I think that they were missing the fourth B in their equation, Martavius Bryant. Hopefully he'll come back. It looks like he's reinstated sooner rather than later. I think that's what they were missing, is that deep threat that will really help AB. Because, AB was the first receiver off the board, and he was still the first overall wide receiver yet again. So, I mean, that's just saying how good he is, even when, Big Ben has his perceived down year.
He's quote-unquote recession-proof.
All right. Do you still have Antonio Brown as your number 1?
As far as receivers go, yeah. I don't think that Julio did enough last year to, cement him above me. There was some time last year preseason where I was like, I tried to make a case for Julio over Antonio, but I've kind of solidified that Antonio Brown for fantasy purposes is my end-all be-all as of right now.
If you had to pick right now, would you pick Julio Jones or Odell Beckham?
I would still have to say Julio over Odell.
I think that despite Shanahan leaving Atlanta, Julio is still going to catch a lot of passes regardless. His touchdown total ultimately will probably be lower than Odell's, but his catches could very well be more.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of Odell, he gets a new friend in Brandon Marshall. How do you see that tandem working out over there in New York?
Well, I can see it either working out one of two ways, and one of those ways I don't really think is going to really happen. I can see one way where, Brandon Marshall, he shows that old man strength, and, he puts in a good year and he steals away work from Odell. But I honestly think it's going to work in Odell's favor because it's going to basically they're going to split work in the slot. I think that it's going to open up more opportunities for Odell Beckham because, Brandon Marshall's going to flash the stuff a little bit in games, and it's going to open up things downfield for Odell. Because last year, predominantly, teams would just double team him. Well, now teams have to game plan around a whole other receiver, so I think that it's going to end up helping Odell. But I could see it working either way, honestly.
You're not at all worried about a loss of total target share or maybe a dip in touchdowns for Odell Beckham?
Like I said, I could see it being possible, and I also heard a rumor that, he might get less work in the slot, which is where he does most of his damage anyways. Like, he does almost all of his damage in the slot. So that would really concern me if we start seeing a start of the season trend where Marshall's stealing a lot of that work from him. But as of right now, I really don't see it as much of a concern.
Yeah, I do think that there can be enough in the Giants' passing offense to support two wide receivers. I do not, however, think it can support three wide receivers. So, sorry, Sterling Shepard, take a seat, sir. What do you see Brandon Marshall playing? What do you see Brandon Marshall playing the opposite role of Odell Beckham? Do you see him having a high touchdown total?
It's hard to say. And these last couple of years, that's usually what buoys him is that touchdown total. I'd like to see him somewhere around 8. I think that I could definitely see him scoring about 8 touchdowns next year.
Oh yeah, easily get 8. I could see him. He's gonna play that flanker. He's gonna be that inside possession receiver. They're trying to open Odell Beckham up deep down the field. He's gonna be that possession receiver, and he's gonna be moving the chains on third down. That's going to be his role, and he's going to be that ultimate red zone option. They didn't have any big receivers to throw to in the red zone. That's why they brought Brandon Marshall there. Let's talk about some receivers that suffered last year. DeAndre Hopkins was a guy that struggled and did not deliver for us in fantasy. He averaged the 6th overall pick, and he finished as wide receiver 34, a whole 29 spots below his draft value from last year. We all know that Coxsweiler sucked ass and couldn't consistently get him the ball. And now, who is going to be their quarterback? Tom Savage? I mean, yeah, he targeted Hopkins, but do you really trust his plays for a full season? You got to think they're going to sign someone or draft somebody, do something.
Yeah, this is a kind of a hairy situation because you brought this up at the start of the show, and I really don't have a good answer for you because I really don't know which way the Texans are going to go with it. But you have to see them signing another arm somewhere. And consistently getting DeAndre Hopkins, and you know what? You put a bug in my head at the end of last year, and it really made a lot of sense to me. He's a guy that, he drives up a high volume. He's a guy that belongs on like a struggling team because, the more targets he gets, he needs a high volume of targets to make something out of that game. Whereas
you have to pepper him with targets because he doesn't get a lot of separation, so his catch rate is not going to really be as high as you'd like it to be. And he gets almost no yards after the catch. Like, it means he's not getting separation.
Right, and that's exactly it, and that makes total sense.
He's a great possession receiver.
Yeah, exactly, and they need a quarterback that can thrive with him. And
you have to throw it to him on target, though.
his production really took a big climb when Savage played quarterback. So I think that if they stick with Savage, I think that I would be feeling a little less sour on DeAndre Hopkins. But if they sign a guy like Kaepernick, who, sometimes, or RG3, who sometimes, likes to let things happen with their legs, and doesn't always, just sit back in the pocket and pass, I think that could be a kind of a hit to his fantasy value. So it kind of could go either way.
I don't know if that would be a good idea, adding Kaepernick to their offense, because they have a read offense. Kaepernick has shown he doesn't really do a good job at reading defenses. I don't know if that would be a good offense for him to join. It's a complicated playbook to learn. I don't know if I'd feel good about that. Maybe like a nice savvy veteran like Romo, but obviously that's not an answer at this point.
So they kind of shot themselves in the foot. Honestly, if I was them, I would have just stuck with Cock Swallower for another year of mediocre quarterback play and then released him and not taken the cap hit and not have lost my second-round pick. Or I would have just not signed him in the first place. But, no, the Texans are too stupid for that.
They should have just signed Hoyer. Let's just put it this way. I have more hope that Allen Robinson will rebound over DeAndre Hopkins. Allen Robinson is the next guy that I want to bring up. He's another guy that struggled, that had quarterback issues. Allen Robinson was averaging the 9th overall pick last year, finished as wide receiver 29. That's 5 spots higher than Hopkins, but still not great. That's not what you drafted him for. But at least with BB, he can produce a lot of garbage time points. Hopefully they fix their offense, because Allen Robinson's very talented. I think they have another regime over there in Jacksonville, so maybe things will get changed up.
Yeah, I mean, one can only hope, right? I do tend to agree with you, too. I feel like Allen Robinson is a lot more upside for me, and I think that he's more of a candidate for a rebound year than DeAndre Hopkins. I agree with you on that one. And I was very surprised, actually, last year by the results. And we all know that, BB, he could be a lost prospect at this point. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the Jaguars actually ended up cutting ties with him, at the end of the season this year if he's fails to impress. He is, because no team's going to touch him if he can't do anything this year. Because, with the inconsistency and the sporadic quarterback play, I don't like it. But at the same time, going back to Allen Robinson, I do agree. He definitely has a lot more talent, and he doesn't have to be exactly peppered with targets, but he has to have some confident quarterback play back there. And that's what I think really hurts him, is the fact that he's playing with BB this year. So if BB doesn't show me anything, he's kind of throwing up some red flags just because of the offense he plays in.
Yeah, hopefully they fix what's going on back there. A quick peek at DeAndre Hopkins and Allen Robinson's April ADP. Who do you think is going before? Who do you think is going first between these two?
I would have to say common knowledge, because, this isn't so common knowledge, but I would probably say that a lot of people would take DeAndre Hopkins first. I wouldn't.
Yes, DeAndre Hopkins is going at the end of the second round this year so far in April, and Allen Robinson is in the middle of the third. Do you feel like that's unjust?
I don't feel like it's so much unjust, because you could justify it really either way. But to me, it doesn't surprise me, because I know how the fantasy masses are. Like, they make a lot of stupid decisions. Like, I think Brandon Marshall was a second rounder last year, and I was like, there's no way I'm taking Brandon Marshall in the second round.
Well, where Hopkins is going, you could have Carlos Hyde or Mark Ingram. Do you like either of them over Hopkins?
I think I like Mark Ingram.
Would you take Mark Ingram over Hopkins? You could also get Doug Baldwin, Amari Cooper over him. Honestly, I'd put both of them over Hopkins. I'd even put Allen Robinson over Hopkins right now, too.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Yeah, I think I would take any of those guys really over Hopkins. Maybe not. I'm sorry. I actually forgot one of the names. But, if it's Amari Cooper versus DeAndre Hopkins, there's no question for me. Amari Cooper has way more upside, So if that works as an example for you.
DeAndre Hopkins is a guy that has to slowly apologize to me before I can trust him.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I always go off of this. It's a 2-season rule. If 2 seasons is a trend for me. If you have a badass season one season, before I am willing to spend a high draft pick on you, you have to prove it to me the next year that you are not a fluke. And DeAndre Hopkins hasn't done that yet.
Another higher round guy that didn't pan out was Keenan Allen. His average ADP was the beginning of the second round, the 8th wide receiver off the board. We all know what happened to him. Do you see him staying healthy this year? Can you trust that?
You know what? I sure as fuck hope so, because I have so much stock invested in him in my dynasty league and everything else. So I sure as hell hope so, but I can't trust it because the last 2 seasons he's had his season shortened by injury. So I would just say if you're a Keenan Allen owner in a dynasty league or something like that, just cross your fingers or get what you can for him if you're really worried about it. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I can see him staying healthy, but it's getting the door's starting to shut on him. Believe it or not, so far his April ADP is 302. So a tear to ACL, you lose a round in value. He's going before Allen Robinson. He very well may be good, but there's a lot of mouths to feed in San Diego all of a sudden. Can you get behind drafting Keenan Allen in the third round?
I just can't. With the guys that he's going around, I'd much rather have an Allen Robinson and just kind of, or somebody else and just kind of hope for, because, somebody with less of an injury history, because, you said it best, you're wasting a pick. If your guy gets, an injury mid-season, you've just wasted your pick because he's a guy that you think is going to carry you to the championship.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I think I'd rather have Brandon Cooks or Allen Robinson in the third round. I know you were big on Mike Evans. You're one of the guys that thought that he could be the number 1 overall wide receiver. And while he finished wide receiver 4, he was taken in the second round, making some amazing catches along the way. Now that Djax is there to help take some attention away, how do you see Mike Evans' production this year?
Oh, I think it's going to be outstanding. I think that he just scratched the surface last year. I've always been an advocate for him. Well, I take that back. I wasn't, about 2 years ago I wasn't, but, man, going into the last offseason, I saw some really big things that I liked, and just last year cemented it for me. So I think that Djax is going to do nothing but help it. It's going to take attention away from him. He's obviously going to get the bulk of the red zone work because of his big size and everything. So I think that Mike Evans, I actually expect him to, maybe not so much fantasy-wise, but I think he could definitely challenge the top 3 of Odell Beckham, Antonio Brown, and Julio Jones. I think he could definitely put himself in that category. Well, I think that he almost has.
Yeah, I feel like Djax might be amazing through the first 3 weeks. Jameis is trying out his new toy, but we all know Djax. He'll put up some stinkers. Mike Evans has the ability to take over the game. So in the grand scheme of things, it shouldn't hurt his numbers, but it might make it easier, and if anything, like you said, help him. So I definitely like that addition.
There was one game last year where Mike Evans had 26 points, and it wasn't even the second quarter yet. It was ridiculous.
Alshon, we're going to talk about some receivers that disappointed again. Alshon Jeffrey was the 13th wide receiver off the board last year. He couldn't keep it together and eventually got suspended. Ended up as wide receiver 53, so not so good. But now it appears that Alshon Jeffrey could be Philadelphia's number 1 receiver alongside Jordan Matthews and Torrey Smith. Are you excited about this or no?
Oh, I'm definitely excited about it. I think that it's great. Carson Wentz showed us some good stuff last year. He obviously showed us some bad stuff too, but he showed a lot of promise going forward. And I think that now that he has a number 1 receiver like Alshon Jeffrey, if he stays away from the fucking performance enhancers and he stays away from, the injury stuff, I think that he's in for a great year.
Some concerns I do have with Alshon, obviously, yes, the injury concern, the soft tissue injuries. I'm also concerned about Carson Wentz a little bit. After week 6 last year, he was rated as one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. Jordan Matthews was the number 1 receiver under Carson Wentz, and he finished at wide receiver 40. So I am a little bit concerned about that. I do think, though, that hopefully Carson Wentz can step up as a passer, especially against the blitz, which really killed him last year. So we'll see. It's definitely intriguing. I think he's going to the end of the third round. This is where you would have to get Alshon Jeffrey.
I think that's about right. I think that's kind of a sweet spot where I would consider taking him because I do like the opportunity that represents,
All right, I know you said this earlier on the show, and I knew that this was going to be a great topic once you said it. How do you feel about Brandon Cooks in New England? I know you said you don't like him at all.
I didn't necessarily say that. I said that there's just so many mouths to feed that I don't think that he's going to really put up like awe-inspiring numbers, And I also said in a previous show too that I think that they might be, bringing all these guys in to kind of mask the fact that, Tom Brady at one point might, eventually start dropping off at one point. So, I don't know what it is, but for a guy like Brandon Cooks, I feel like, he's definitely going to have a good season. I think that he'll probably eclipse. I think they'll definitely eclipse the 1,000-yard mark. But at the same time, there's just so many mouths to be. There's Julian Edelman. There's Malcolm Mitchell, who had he was really underrated last year. He was starting to really come on at the end of last year. And then you had Danny Amendola, who's still there. You have all those running backs, especially Deion Lewis, who catches passes. Same with James White. I mean, there's just so many there that it's gonna. For me, I just don't see why I would justify spending like a third-round pick on a Brandon Cooks when I could get somebody else that's just gonna get peppered with targets.
Last year, Julian Edelman was one of the least efficient wide receivers in the league. He's getting up there in age. He had 160 targets last year. I think he loses a lot of those targets. Last year with the Saints, with Drew Brees, who likes to spread the ball around, Cooks had 117 targets. So I definitely think that, he could be in line for a bump in targets. This is where are these targets going to come from? Julian Edelman was getting 160. We know he's not getting 160 again. But how many is Brandon Cooks going to get is the question. Do you see Brandon Cooks getting more or less than 117 targets?
I would have to say less. I think that he'll still get a high volume of targets, no doubt. But I just think that number is a little too lofty for me.
Well, the one good thing that is running in his favor is the Patriots. They ran more plays than any other team in the league last year with their hurry-up offense. That could play into his favor.
That is true. That is very true. I didn't actually take that under consideration until you said that, but that's very true.
We all know what happened to Sammy Watkins last year. I think they kind of rushed him back too soon. He had off-season foot surgery. Obviously, you're gonna be worried about him this year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But the upside's always there. You just know what Sammy Watkins can be, and then I think you have to kind of draft him accordingly. Like if he's going too high for you, and you're like, oh, there's all these red flags. But if he's going at a kind of a value, and like people are like, oh yeah, I'm passing on Sammy Watkins. He gets injured all the time. Then that's when you kind of strike. You have to get him in that sweet spot.
He's going in the middle of the fourth round. He's going before Demaryius Thomas. And shortly after him is Michael Crabtree at the end of the fourth. Beginning of the fifth round, you got Brandon Marshall and Larry Fitzgerald.
That's hard for me. That's a really weird area for me because I really think that, Michael Crabtree is going to see some regression. And I think that Demaryius Thomas is pretty much steady. He steadied out. He peaked like with Peyton Manning, in that when they went to the Super Bowl in 2013. And then after that, he's kind of fallen off and kind of hit kind of a sweet spot for himself. So I think that if I'm in that area, you're either going to get the boomer bust guy like Sammy Watkins, you're going to get a Mr. Consistency in Demaryius Thomas, or you're going to get like a same thing. You're going to expect the world out of Michael Crabtree, and you might only get just a little bit out of him.
I'm taking Demaryius Thomas over Sammy Watkins all day.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he's getting you consistent wide receiver 2 numbers all year. He may not get those explosion weeks anymore, but that's why I love Denver receivers because they're both undervalued. I love Demaryius Thomas because he's undervalued. I love Emmanuel Sanders because he's undervalued. They're both consistent wide receiver 2s that you can plug into your lineup.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly where I was going with that. Because Demaryius Thomas, if you're drafting a boomer bust guy like a guy like Michael Crabtree or Sammy Watkins, but they have those red flags there. Get a guy that you for the last couple of years has finished in the same exact spot, or like right around where he's supposed to finish, kind of leveled out. or puts up consistent numbers every year and just gets that consistent wide receiver too. Why play around?
I'd probably go with Sammy Watkins over Demaryius Thomas in a best ball situation where you don't have to set your lineups. He'll just be in your lineup when he explodes.
Exactly.
So I mean, it's really hard to because he's so talented. He just can't stay healthy. Are guys like Randall Cobb and Julian Edelman, do you think that they might be a little bit underrated this year? Just because, with Randall Cobb, you had Devontae Adams and Jordy Nelson both get double-digit touchdowns. Maybe he's being overlooked. And obviously with the acquisition of Brandon Cooks, maybe people are underlooking Julian Edelman as well.
Edelman's a guy that I think that a lot of people are, especially Dynasty League owners are like, I could see myself getting rid of him. Like they're trying to shop him around quietly, after a big Super Bowl performance, where he caught that catch. For me, I think that both of those guys are going to see a big drop off, especially with Julian Edelman because, they just brought in Brandon Cooks. I think he's going to lose a lot of work to him. I think it's going to be, a shit show in New England with who's going to get the ball, trying to decipher that fantasy situation.
There's always this fixation with the number 3 wide receiver in Green Bay's offense, and right now that's Randall Cobb. I think for a lot of people, do you see any scenario though where he outdoes a guy like Devontae Adams?
I would like to say that Devontae Adams is a little bit better than Julian Edelman this year.
No, I'm talking about Randall Cobb.
Oh, Randall Cobb. Okay, all right. Yeah, I thought you said Devontae Adams. I'm pretty sure you did.
Yeah. I'm saying, is there any chance that Randall Cobb can finish higher than Devontae Adams this year?
No, I don't think so. I think that Devontae Adams kind of almost cemented himself as that number 2 in Green Bay, but it's a hard situation in this.
Because it kind of seems like Devontae Adams had a fluky touchdown total last year. I think he had 12 touchdowns. It seems kind of fluky to me.
It does, yeah. I definitely think it's a red flag. Personally, I don't want either one of them on my team, but.
Well, I mean, Randall Cobb, he's at least the 3rd best receiver on that team. He finished as wide receiver 49 last year, and that's not acceptable for him. He's capable of doing so much better, especially when he shouldn't even have a lot of attention on him. So that's why I think maybe he could be a little bit under the radar. Maybe teams give him a lot more one-on-one coverages. Maybe we haven't seen the last of Randall Cobb.
Maybe not.
Is there any other receivers that you want to mention? I do want to talk about a couple of sneaky acquisitions throughout the preseason or the off-season.
All right.
Do you think that Kevin White is going to be the number 1 receiver for Chicago?
I mean, at this point, yeah, probably. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, he has so much of his injury history is really a joke at this point because it's every year.
He's such a quagmire to me because you don't really know what you got in him because he hasn't been on the field. But he might be in a great position as a number 1 receiver, and he's probably getting drafted real late. I'm not even sure what his ADP is right now, but I'm sure it's pretty good value.
Probably, yeah. I mean, you might as well just take a chance with him in a late-round pick and just, maybe hit the lottery,
Last year was a great year to find receivers on the waiver wire. There was quite a bit, like Mike Wallace finished as the wide receiver 22. You probably picked him up off the waiver wire. Kenny Britt finished as wide receiver 21. Devontae Adams, wide receiver 12. Terrell Pryor, wide receiver 20. Cameron Meredith down the stretch, wide receiver 41. There's a lot of good names out there. Even Tyreek Hill finished as wide receiver 26. Jamison Crowder, wide receiver 25. Tyrell Williams. I can keep on going on. Rashard Matthews. There was a lot of good waiver wire pickups in the wide receiver. That's why I'm trying to say wide receiver is deeper than it's ever been.
Yeah, it really is.
All right, let's wrap this show up and touch over the tight ends real fast. We got Gronk. He was the number 1 tight end off of the board. Obviously, he only played half the season. He finished as tight end number 26. Obviously, a huge letdown, especially if you drafted him early in the 2nd round. You're feeling betrayed right now, Where do you feel comfortable drafting Gronk going into next year?
with the reports of him being progressing well with his health, I think honestly you'd have to get him in the second round. I can't see a situation where even in mock drafts you would go to the third round. I personally would feel a lot more comfortable drafting him in the third round, but I think that if you were very confident that his health was going to be on his side this year, I think you'd have to get him in the second.
Right now his ADP is 209, so he's going towards the back end of the second round. I think that's not a bad spot for him. I probably still wouldn't take him there. But I mean, it's not a bad price for him.
I don't think I would either. I think that if he fell to the third round to my pick, I think I would definitely take him in the third round. But any time before that, I don't think that I would consider. There's just too much talent there.
And, with Grant going out for the season, it just totally deflated the tight end position across the board. It was such a bad year for tight ends. It was. I think there was just as many kickers that met the 100-point threshold as there was tight ends. Actually, I want to find this, and I want to know if I'm speaking truth right now. Let's see. Yeah, there was 24. There's 24 tight ends over 100 points, and there was 22 kickers over 100 points. The top two kickers equaled tight end number 6. That's how bad the tight end position was last year, and a lot of that had to do with Gronk being injured. So, I mean, I just can't trust taking him that early, to be honest.
I really can't either.
And then if you top it off, Jordan Reed, he was the second tight end off the board. He finished as tight end number 8, so he underperformed by 6 spots. You didn't have him during the most important time of the year during your fantasy football playoffs. A lot of people are saying he could be one concussion away from retirement. I mean, that's got to be a concern going into next year. He's being taken right now at the back end of the 4th round.
Yeah, he really is, honestly, and his injuries were just so bad last year, they piled up, and he's just such a fragile guy, like, overall. Not even talking about concussions, he's just a really fragile guy. Like, I think
he did play through a separated shoulder. That takes a lot of guts.
It does, but at the same time, it takes a lot of guts, but even then, it was like he was forcing himself on the field and as an owner, I would rather him just, like, get healthy and not force himself into playing time that he's going to burn my team with,
Would you consider taking Travis Kelce over both of them, both Gronk and Reed?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that he's a way better value, and last year he was a dominant force.
There's a rule out there about tight ends that it's called Rule 86. If Jordan Reed's healthy, you play him. But I'm making a clause to that rule. It's Rule 86, Clause A, draft number 87 instead. That's Travis Kelce.
I think that's a good clause to that rule.
I mean, he was the number 1 tight end last year. He was drafted in the 6th round. That's excellent value for people that wanted to grab him. He's going at the back end of the 3rd round now, so the whole game has changed. He doesn't have the value that he had last year. So I probably wouldn't end up taking him either.
Right, totally.
Julius Thomas, he is now a Miami Dolphin. They traded him for a 7th round. The Jags traded him, I think, for like a 7th round pick. How do you see him fitting in now that he's reunited back with Adam Gase?
I think that if there's anybody that can do anything with him, Adam Gase can, but at the same time, I mean, he's another guy that, speaking of fragile, he's just so fragile. I mean, even in Denver, before his season debut even happened, I was, as a Broncos fan, I was aware of his presence, before he even blew up that one year with Peyton Manning. I knew he was around. It was like, I was like, why are the Broncos keeping this guy around if he's just going to be injured, And they held on to him for a good reason because he's a very good tight end, but he's just never healthy. So I think that if he can be healthy, I think that Adam Gase can definitely use him in the offense, but that remains to be seen.
Well, my whole thing is Miami doesn't throw the tight end a whole lot. They don't use their tight end that much.
That's a good point.
That's why we were expecting them to use Jordan Cameron the way that the Browns were using him, and Miami just didn't use him that way. He never panned out. So, I mean, I'm not seeing it. I'm not buying it. get that fake news out of here.
You are fake news.
Yeah, of course we are. Tyler Eifert, speaking of another tight end that can't stay healthy, this is a guy, he was drafted as the 11th tight end off the board last year, end of the 9th round. It had to do with the fact that he wasn't going to be playing right away. And, you know, he showed a little bit when he started to play. How do you feel about Tyler Eifert going into next year? Where would you feel comfortable drafting him?
It's really hard to say with Tyler Eifert. I mean, again, speaking of quagmire, he's a quagmire because I just don't know where to put him, you know, especially with that injury history. I don't think I would really feel comfortable with taking him probably where he's ended up going, which is probably like somewhere around like the 7th or 8th round, right?
No, you're not going to like where he's going if you thought he was going in the 7th or 8th round. He's going in the middle of the 5th. The middle of the 5th. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I definitely don't think that I would take him there.
Too high for my blood. But I know a guy that you might like, Martellus Bennett. He was drafted as the 12th tight end on the board. In the back of the 10th round, he was the 7th tight end overall. He is now in Green Bay. He is going to be their starter. How do you like that fit for him?
Oh, I love it. Play with a guy like Aaron Rodgers in a pass-heavy offense. I mean, what's not to love?
I mean, where do you have him in terms of ranking? Like, where would you put him?
Oh, I haven't even really begun like my rankings yet. But if I had to do a rough ranking on him, I'd probably tight end such a light position. I'd probably put him in the top 10.
I probably have him at like 7 or 8 right now. Let's see how he's being drafted. That's the more important question with some of these tight ends because it's such a scarce position that people are willing to draft them earlier now more than ever. Right now he is being drafted as the 11th tight end off the board, and he is going like right in the middle of the 9th round. So that's not bad at all for him, to be honest.
Yeah, it really isn't.
I mean, that's a pretty good spot. I know a lot of people say be wary about tight ends in the 8th and 9th rounds. We get it. A lot of them don't pan out. That's true about a lot of positions or a lot of players at this position. So I'm not too worried about that. I guess a few more people I want to talk about is Jimmy Graham. He was the 15th tight end off the board, finishing as tight end 5. How surprising is he last year coming off a torn patellar? I mean, he outdid everyone's expectations, I'd like to think.
Yeah, I mean, he totally surprised the hell out of me. I didn't think that he had it in him. I thought I was like R.I.P. Jimmy Graham, but yeah, I mean, coming into next year, you have to put him in the top 10 as far as the tight end conversation goes, and really,
you can almost make an argument for top 5.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, you really could.
I mean, would you prefer Tyler Eifert or Jimmy Graham?
It would depend where either of them was going. Me, I'm like a value guy.
Tyler Eifert is in the middle of the 5th. Jimmy Graham is at the end of the 5th.
I think I would probably honestly rather have Jimmy Graham.
I feel like he'd probably be more consistent because he'll get more volume than Tyler Eifert because Tyler Eifert's never been a volume monster. But, I mean, I think Eifert has more touchdown potential over Jimmy Graham.
Especially, yeah, exactly, now that...
So I guess it really comes down to what kind of league do you play in. You know, if you're in a PPR league, you're probably going to want to go with Jimmy Graham. But if you're in a standard league, you can roll with Eifert. He's going to get you touchdowns. Don't know if he's going to stay healthy, but...
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, I probably wouldn't take Jimmy Graham. I probably wouldn't take either, but if I had to choose, I'd probably take Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, agreed.
And I just want to touch. This is how bad the tight end position was. For tight end 1, there was 5 tight ends that were waiver wire. There probably were waiver wire pickups that finished as a tight end 1. Obviously, the biggest one, Kyle Rudolph, He finished as a number 3 tight end.
Gold.
You got to think, though, do you think it's fool's gold, or do you think that Sam Bradford just really likes tight ends?
At this point, I mean, he really show a lot, in Philadelphia, that he likes tight end, or in St. Louis. So I would like to say it's a little bit of fool's gold at this point, because like I said, anything that's below 2 seasons is kind of isn't a pattern for me. So yeah, that's where
you
I'm
want
at
to wait.
with it.
You're more of a wait and see type on him right now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a wait and see guy. I would have to depend. If depending on last year, if I saw him going at kind of a value, I think I would still get him. But usually,
end of the
like him
8th
don't
round.
go at the value. Yeah, I would feel comfortable taking him there. I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah, the other big free agent acquisition, waiver wire acquisition last year was Cameron Brate, finishing as a 6th tight end overall.
Gold.
He is the 8th tight end off the board so far this year. You're going in the middle of the 7th round. I mean, he does play on a better offense than Kyle Rudolph.
Yeah, that is true. But I feel more like Cameron Brate's a little more fool's gold than me because, Minnesota, I just feel like they have like a little bit less options. Now with D-Jax even, I think that he's definitely going to see, a little less of a volume share.
Yeah, I feel like the Tampa Bay is going to be in line for a lot more passes than Minnesota, and that's what kind of wins me over.
I don't know, man. With Sam Bradford, they kind of became a pass-heavy team because they couldn't get anything going on the ground because they have no offensive line.
Well, it'll remain to be seen. At least he does have the most accurate quarterback in the league.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the last guy I want to talk about is Jack Doyle. He was another guy you could have gotten off the waiver wire, finished as tight end 12, so he was a fringe tight end 1 last year. Now that Dwayne Allen is gone, he has the whole tight end field to himself. I think he could be a sneaky sleeper this year at tight end. He's my tight end that I would probably be targeting late.
Yeah, I could see it happening. I mean, he's pretty much the guy in Indianapolis. Take that for what it's worth. You got a guy like Andrew Luck throwing you passes. I think that your fantasy value could be pretty high, and he actually showed it last year, especially with those touchdowns. I think he's going to be more of like a guy that, he's only going to really be fantasy relevant if, he hits pay dirt, So he's got to score a touchdown to get you your nut every week in fantasy.
I don't even see him as a top 25 tight end right now on the fantasy football calculator. So that's saying like how much of a sleeper I think this guy is. But I definitely think that he can be a tight end 1 in this league, especially with the target share that tight ends from Indianapolis hold in that offense. He should easily be able to be a tight end 1 again.
I could definitely see it. I think that, wow, I can't believe that people are sleeping on him that much. I didn't even realize that.
All right. Is there anything else you want to add, K-Mill?
No.
All right. I think that will pretty much do it for today's show. Is there any topics that you've been wanting to talk about that we haven't touched on so far this off season?
Oh, are you talking to me? I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to just in general.
No, I was asking, is there any football topics that we have not brought up on this show so far this off season that you would like to talk about?
No, I like where we're going with this. I really think that we've covered a lot of good stuff. I think that I'd like to get us into a little bit of way too early rankings coming up here soon. I think that's the one thing that I think we haven't done yet.
That's something that we like to do kind of early.
Yeah, I think that we should sort of wait until after the draft though to do that. Though I think that's a little too early right at this moment.
It'd probably be a little bit better if we did so. That way we know how to. Because I know I'd have a lot of trouble doing ranking running backs at this point, just because I don't know who's a starter and who's not.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, I think. Yeah, so I think that down the road, once the draft's over, we definitely need to do that.
But yeah, I think we will do an early ranking show coming up here soon. I'm just really excited for the draft. I want to know where people are going. I want to know. I'm a nosy football addict.
Me too. I want Christian McCaffrey to the Broncos right now.
No, he needs to go to the Saints.
Yeah, I keep hearing that. I keep hearing that in the Eagles, and no. I'm selfish. I don't know if he's gonna go to the Broncos. I doubt it, but a guy can hope, right?
All right. Well, that will pretty much do it for today's show. If you enjoyed it, please go on iTunes and leave us a review. Subscribe to us if you haven't already. Our shows are also on Spreaker and Stitcher for you non-iPhone users. We have a Google Play app, so you can look for us on there, totally free if you're on the go. That'll be it. Thank you for listening to Downer.